Hello, and welcome to our latest Sierra Forum. I'm Kristen Henry, Managing Attorney at the Environmental Law Program here at Sierra Club, and I'll be the host of this Sierra Forum. Our forums give Sierra Club members and supporters a chance to hear directly from our staff and partners about our work to protect clean air, clean water, a stable climate, and wildlands. Thank you all for tuning in, especially in these extraordinary times. And we hope that everyone in the audience is weathering the storm okay. We'll do about 30 minutes of discussion and then leave plenty of time for question and answer. So please submit your question in the Q&A box. Despite a challenging landscape on multiple fronts, our environmental law program has won a string of victories this summer, including blocking the illegal construction of Trump's border wall, canceling the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, reinstating the Obama administration penalties for violation of the Clean Car Standards, and delaying other fossil fuel projects. We'll discuss these victories and also talk through the work we have ahead of us and how you can get involved. Here today, we have Gloria Smith, Managing Attorney, who's been leading the effort against the border wall. Ellie Benson, Senior Attorney who fights gas pipelines and worked on the cancellation of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. And Alejandro Nunez, Senior Attorney who works to ensure pollution reductions in the transportation and power sectors. Gloria, Ellie, and Ale, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Gloria, why don't we start with you? We understand the border wall case is now before the U.S. Supreme Court. How did this case begin?
Thank you, Kristen. Kristen, thanks everybody. It's nice to see so many people show up for this. I think the first thing that people need to understand about challenging the border wall is that the Trump administration has relied on a 2006 immigration statute to waive all laws so that he can build his wall. This means that public participation and environmental statutes like NEPA, the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Water Act, none of those laws apply when it comes to building the border wall. To date, the Department of Homeland Security has issued 31 waivers for wall projects, exempting some 65 different laws. So it's made challenging this project, this 2,000-mile project, extremely challenging. And there has been a ton of litigation, but it's largely been unsuccessful because of this. So this case, the case I'm talking about today, is different. This concerns Trump's declaration of a national emergency. This case began immediately after the largest and longest government shutdown in US history. It ended in February of 2019 when Trump signed a budget that only allowed him a little bit more than $1 billion to build his wall. The very next day, he turned around and declared a national emergency, and that he hoped would allow him to raid various pots of Defense Department funds. Over a 3-day weekend, which just happened to be President's Day weekend in mid-February, ACLU and the Sierra Club drafted and then filed immediately on Tuesday a complaint in federal court alleging constitutional violations because of this illegal declaration. Today, we have won every place we've been. We've won numerous injunctions before the federal district court. And then the case went to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals a couple of times, and we finally won on the merits a couple of months ago, and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals permanently enjoined all border wall construction for the projects that we challenged. However, the Department of Justice went to the Supreme Court and asked them to stay those injunctions. They have now filed a request for the court to review the Ninth Circuit opinion, and the court will let us know on October 9th whether or not they're going to hear the case. We certainly hope that they don't and that they let the Ninth Circuit decision stand.
Thank you. Would you talk about how the border wall fight is both an environmental issue and an attack on human rights as well?
Yeah, so It is a 2,000-mile border, and it's just a massively complex and frankly beautiful landscape. Wall construction is occurring everywhere from San Diego all the way to the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. And I'd like to focus on the Rio Grande Valley briefly because it's kind of a microcosm and perfectly encapsulates both the human toll and the environmental impacts associated with wall construction on our borderlands. In the Rio Grande Valley, there are numerous national wildlife refuges. There's the National Butterfly Center, which provides habitat to numerous native species and all kinds of parks. Equally important, or more importantly, are all of these small towns, like one like Mission, Texas, which is right there on the border on the Rio Grande. I've been here. These are tight-knit, old, traditional communities. Unbelievably, what would happen is the way the wall is to be constructed through the Rio Grande Valley, it arbitrarily would follow this levee, not the border, which is the Rio Grande River. And in some cases, this levee is 1 mile away from the actual border. And on the other side of that levee is an old chapel built in 1865, the La Lomita Chapel, which is just a community center for people who live in these towns. There's a boat ramp, there's parks, people live there, people work and go back and forth. There's never been any idea that that was some kind of a barrier. And so what would happen is if the wall was built through there, it would permanently put behind a 18-foot wall all of these incredible places. So that's one example. Another example is the Oregon Pike National Monument. The Border Patrol has been using dynamite and bulldozers to go through a UNESCO bioreserve to mow down cactuses in furtherance of building the wall. I mean, the stakes could not be higher. These are sacred places for a number of tribes in our country. So this is what we're facing with border wall construction. Those are just a couple of examples.
Thank you for that. Ellie, I'd like to turn to you now. Can you tell us about the huge victory in stopping the Atlantic Coast Pipeline?
Sure, thanks, Kristen, and thanks everyone for joining today. So for some background, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, or ACP as we call it, was a 600-mile gas pipeline proposed to start in West Virginia and run through Virginia and North Carolina. And as soon as it was announced, I think in 2014 or 2015, there was incredibly strong grassroots opposition that immediately sprang up all along the 600-mile route. So the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, is the agency primarily responsible for approving gas pipelines like the ACP. Unfortunately, it has a long history of rubber stamping them for approval. So along with our partners, the Sierra Club challenged the FERC authorization for the pipeline, but we didn't stop there. We also challenged, again, along with many, many partners in this fight, approvals issued by the U.S. Forest Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the National Park Service, among others. By my count, we were involved in at least 17 legal actions that were in one way or another related to the ACP. And we won a lot of those cases. ACP had to stop construction pretty early on. They were eventually years behind schedule. Their costs started to balloon, eventually to, I think, above $8 billion. And at the same time, there was increasing evidence of what we and our allies had been saying from the very beginning, that the pipeline just simply was not needed. And in July, we received the news that the pipeline developers were scrapping the project.
So you're saying that this project is not just stalled, but completely canceled?
That's right, it's completely canceled.
Can you tell us, go ahead.
I was gonna say it was a huge victory. You know, when it was first announced, it had this air of inevitability around it. It was kind of a scrappy coalition of landowners and environmental groups and other local groups facing off against these huge companies with very deep pockets, kind of a David versus Goliath situation. So it was a really huge and important and hard-fought victory.
Can you tell us about the fight against the Atlantic Coast Pipeline's proposed compressor station in Union Hill, Virginia?
Yeah, so gas pipelines need compressor stations along their route, essentially to maintain the pressure in the pipe and keep the gas moving. These are really big industrial facilities that are noisy 24/7, spew hundreds of tons of pollution to the air each year, not something you want in your community. Unfortunately, ACP wanted to put one of their 3 compressor stations for the 600-mile route in Union Hill, Virginia, which is a historic African-American community that was actually founded by freed slaves after the Civil War. So for years, Union Hill residents fought ACP's plan to site this facility in their community. And after the state Virginia approved an air permit for the compressor station, they filed a lawsuit. And like FERC, the state agencies were basically refusing to acknowledge that the compressor station would disproportionately impact a predominantly Black community. They were kind of just turning a blind eye to the fact that almost everyone who lived around the compressor station was Black. So we were able to play a supporting role in that litigation by filing an amicus brief, that's Latin for friend of the court brief, on behalf of the Sierra Club, the state NAACP, and a couple other groups that focused on the environmental justice issues. And ultimately, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in the community's favor with a really great environmental justice opinion, which is a pretty big deal because good environmental justice opinions by circuit courts are few and far between, unfortunately.
Congratulations on that. Ale, I'd like to ask you about the Trump administration and how it has completed a series of regulations to roll back the Obama era clean car standards. We're fighting to restore those standards, and we recently beat the Trump administration's effort to skirt the law and give a pass to allow automakers to pollute more by paying lower penalties for violations. Can you tell us about that victory, Ale?
Yes, sure, Christine, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. It's really nice to have so many people online. Thanks so much for your time. So let me give you all a little bit of a chronology because we had to go to court twice over the same issue. The claims are different, but this goes a little bit back in time to a law that the US Congress passed in year 2015, requiring all agencies in the federal government to update the penalties under the statutes they administer to account for the effects of inflation. So as you might be familiar with this or not, that under pretty much the system of administrative laws of the United States, there are many laws that set a monetary amount as a penalty for violation of the rules set forth in those laws. So what happened was Congress realized that there are some amounts of those penalties going back years in time that needed updating because those very low amounts don't reflect inflation and therefore weaken the stringency of the whole system of rules. So Congress passed a law in 2015 requiring all agencies, including NHTSA, which administers the corporate average fuel economy standards, under a law that's called the Energy Policy and Conservation Act, to actually update their penalties for inflation. That law, just for reference, is called the Inflation Adjustment Act. So in 2016, in December, the Obama administration increased the applicable penalty for violation of the fuel economy standards, also called CAFE, that were set in the 1970s at $5 per tenth of mile per gallon, that the automakers' vehicles go below the standards. They had a small adjustment back in the 90s, but other than that, they were totally outdated. So the Obama administration increased the penalty all the way to $14 per tenth of mile per gallon. So the two trade groups of the auto manufacturer companies asked the Obama administration to basically give them a pass and give them more time because they had planned some model years. So this rule was meant to enter into effect in 2019. And what happened is that at the beginning of the Trump administration, the White House issued a memo requiring agencies to look at those rules that had not yet entered into effect and delay the application of those rules. So the civil penalty rule under the Obama administration was one of those. Then NHTSA, the agency under the Department of Transportation that is in charge of administering the penalties, they basically issued 3 short-term delays, and then they issued a rule that said an indefinite delay of the application of the rule. So we challenged that delay rule in the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. Basically, there are a series of claims, but our key one was that Congress never gave NHTSA that authority. The court agreed with us and basically said, as of today, the date of our order, we are ordering NHTSA to reinstate the Obama penalty. So then, instead of complying with the order, NHTSA reconsidered the rule, now issuing a new rule saying that actually the CAFE penalty is not a civil monetary penalty under the Inflation Adjustment Act. So that basically required us to go to court, back to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, to now challenge the reconsideration rule, where our key argument was that, of course, this is a civil monetary penalty that works very much in the same way that penalties under every other statute that gives authority to federal agencies, and the court agreed with us, and on August 31st, it issued a decision again vacating this new rule and reinstating the Obama penalty.
Did the court express a reaction to the fact that states and NGOs had to bring a second lawsuit to review the same set of issues?
So yeah. So I will say there's some language in the opinion of the court where they were basically saying, so we vacated the delay rule. We ordered NHTSA to reinstate the Obama civil penalty, and instead of doing that, as we ordered, you actually issued another rule to try to go around this. And we're now again reviewing. It's like I said, the legal claims are different, but they were reviewing the same sets of facts. So then they said, and we are reinstating the Obama civil penalty again.
Will the higher penalty promote compliance with the, as you referred to them, CAFE standards?
Yes, so this is a key issue why it's so important to preserve a system of higher penalties as one of the key components of defending the clean car standards, because the higher the penalties, the more the incentives for automakers to actually comply with the rules. The standard was so weak that it actually did not promote compliance, and there's record of several auto manufacturer companies making a decision to violate the standards because it's just less expensive to pay for the penalties. So it's definitely very helpful, and we can discuss a bit more later the broader picture of our defense work on the clean car standards, because now we have a weaker rule that the Trump administration issued, like the fuel economy standards, but it's definitely very positive and very important to have reinstated the Obama penalty as part of the entire framework.
Thank you. Ellie, I have some follow-up questions for you about the ACP fight. We have achieved, as we said, a cancellation of the pipeline. Now, since most pipeline fights are continuous and just lead to delays of the pipelines, could you talk about a strategy for fighting permits that lead to cancellation and not delay?
Sure. So I think part of it is that we hammered them on basically every permit they were issued. And we didn't win every single one of those lawsuits, but we won a lot of them. And in part that was because they had done a shoddy job. They were trying to rush this through. So there were major holes in the permits that, we were able to successfully challenge in court. I think it got to a point where they were, several years behind schedule because they had to stop constructing. Like I mentioned, the costs had ballooned up to something around 8 billion when they were supposed to be around 4 billion. And it just wasn't worth it to them anymore. Another aspect of that kind of delay is that the political landscape had changed a bit and the energy landscape had changed a bit. I mean, we said from the beginning that the pipeline wasn't needed, that the gas that it would be transporting was not necessary. But during the long drawn out legal fights, both Virginia and North Carolina made progress on legislation that advanced pretty stringent goals regarding how much carbon that they would be releasing in their states. So that was another thing, you know, the utilities that were behind the project, back in 2014 and 2015, they had all these plans for these new gas plants. And that was just, you know, no longer feasible under the new laws about restricting carbon output. So it was a combination of things, but I think, you know, they kind of saw the writing on the wall. You know, they actually canceled the pipeline right after they had a victory at the Supreme Court involving the Forest Service authorization to give them a permit to cross the Appalachian Trail. So you would think after a big Supreme Court victory, you know, they would be ready to go, but they still face so many other obstacles that it was just a few weeks after that they pulled the plug on the project.
Thank you for all your work on that. I'd like to look ahead for the rest of this year and beyond and see what's next for you. You're on mute.
Hi. Sorry, everybody. Obviously, our greatest hope is on October 9th, the Supreme Court decides not to review the Ninth Circuit decision. That would completely stop, that would stop all wall construction for the projects that we challenged. But more broadly speaking, under a new administration who didn't have a border wall as their vanity project, we would ask that they cease all wall construction, cancel any contracts that are outstanding, and then more importantly, I think it's important that Sierra Club and other, you know, our other allies really push a new administration to tear down that wall. You know, there are some places that just, you know, they should not be there, and that in order to, you know, rehabilitate some of the habitat and restore some of these communities, we need to reverse some of those projects. So that's what I'm thinking about looking forward next year.
Thank you. Ellie, we've gotten a few questions already about the Mountain Valley Pipeline. So perhaps you could tell us about that?
Sure. So like the ACP, the MVP is a massive gas pipeline that would start in West Virginia and run through Virginia. And the pipeline developers are trying to also build an extension into North Carolina. And like ACP, we've been fighting them every step of the way. So along with our partners, we've successfully challenged several of their permits, the US Forest Service permit, the Bureau of Land Management, US Army Corps of Engineers, and MVP still lacks all those permits. Unfortunately, FERC has allowed MVP to keep building the pipeline in certain areas, even after the courts vacated those permits. And because they're building through really steep mountainous terrain with highly erodible soil that's prone to landslides, and their assumptions about how well they could handle that were wildly optimistic, that construction was doing a lot of damage to streams, to the habitat within those streams. But MVP had to halt construction last year after we filed a stay motion in the Fourth Circuit showing that impacts to endangered species like the Roanoke log perch, which is a fish that's found in very limited areas in Virginia and North Carolina, and the Indiana bat and a few others, hadn't been properly considered. Now, a year later, the Fish and Wildlife Service just came out with their new biological opinion regarding endangered species. And actually just yesterday, MVP requested that FERC allow it to resume construction. And we just filed an opposition to that request about 30 minutes ago.
Well, thank you for making time for us then. Ale, what's on the horizon for you?
Yes, so we are currently in litigation. There are two big pieces to this for those of you who might not have strong familiarity, although we've read a lot in the news about this. There are two big pieces of litigation happening right now that based on the Trump rollback of the Clean Car Standards. One is called SAFE One, the Safe, Affordable, Fuel Efficient Rule. This is a way that the Trump administration calls it CAFE standards. So CAFE stands for Corporate Average Fuel Economy. is the fuel economy standards for passenger cars and light duty trucks. So the Trump administration rolled back the standards. There are two big pieces, both of which are separate pieces of litigation. One is a regulation from NHTSA that declared all of California's regulations for greenhouse gases and their zero emission vehicle mandate preempted under the fuel economy law, as well as EPA's action withdrawing the waiver for greenhouse gases and the ZEP mandates that California has authority under the Clean Air Act historically to do. So that's one piece that we're currently litigating. And then there's a more recent rule that's called SAFE Part 2, which is the CAFE standard. It's the Trump administration rolled back the Obama fuel economy and greenhouse gas standards, requiring a much, much lower improvement in efficiency and reduction in greenhouse gases for the years 2020 through 2026. And we are also challenging that Trump regulation in court. So we're currently basically, one case is more advanced than the other in terms of briefing, but we're in court right now, and we will continue to do so, complete the briefing in SAFE 2, go through oral arguments. So that's what we're working on.
Thank you. What can our audience, our members, and our supporters do to take action? Gloria?
Again, I think the only way we can stop Trump's border wall is if we do have a favorable outcome in the election. You know, we have a new administration who's not wedded to this, but at the same time, there's going to be so much demand on this new administration's time. I think it's very important that people do speak out and talk about how terrible this was, you know, what a horrible thing that was in our history, and that we really do need to make this right by canceling the contracts and, you know, getting rid of some of these most egregious segments and restoring the borderlands to the way they were before Trump came along. And I think, you know, a lot of it's going to come down to public opinion because there's going to be so many issues. And I personally think this is an important one.
I think a lot of people agree with you. Ellie, what do you think our supporters and members can do to help take action?
The first thing I'd say is just getting involved at the local level. I think that can take a lot of forms, whether it's supporting local initiatives on clean energy or fighting a proposal of some polluting project that's been proposed in your area. Because that kind of grassroots activism is really the driving force behind so many of our wins, including our legal wins. Like the ACP cancellation. The second thing I'd say is getting involved in public comment periods. Folks may be receiving emails from the Sierra Club and other groups asking you to submit a comment to decision makers about a specific project or a proposed rollback of an important environmental law, which unfortunately we're seeing a lot of these past few years. And it's really helpful when people weigh in on that stuff and submit a comment. Just as an example, MVP just requested a 2-year extension to build and operate its pipeline. And along with our partners, we gathered 43,000 comments opposing that request and submitted that to the FERC docket. And that lets the agency know that people care about this, people are paying attention, and that really does support our work.
Thanks. Ale?
So I will echo what Gloria and Ellie have said, and I wanted to say, so we're fighting the Trump administration in the courts. I want to thank all of you who in the past have really contributed to our litigation work by helping us becoming standing declarants for us to be able to file these lawsuits representing you as our members, but really living in the communities and knowing what are the effects of these regulations, how those regulations will increase climate and air pollution. All of those things are very important to our work, and we thank you for that. And while we keep on fighting these regulations in the court, there are other ways to get involved. I can tell you in the Clean Transportation campaign, there are other folks in our team who are really focused on accountability of the automakers who have sided with the Trump administration in litigation. So interveners in support of the Trump side that are threatening California's authority. One of them is General Motors. The other one is Toyota. And there are campaigns and there are ways to get involved. We can get this information to you if you haven't received it about how to get involved and put pressure on those companies to not support the Trump administration. And of course, as Ellie mentioned, like to the extent that in a different administration, new rules are crafted. Your voice is very important in the rulemaking process, putting comments in the docket to explain why stronger regulations are needed and they are necessary to address the urgency of climate change. Those things are very important and very helpful to our work.
Thank you. Now we'll turn to questions from the audience. So if you like, you can submit a question through the chat box. Gloria, I'd like to start my first question with you. Can you talk about the adverse effects on the of the border wall on wildlife movements, such as jaguars and wolves?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thank you for raising that. Here's the situation. The Trump administration has built 300 miles of wall, only 5 of which are new. What they're doing is they're replacing what's called vehicle borders that have been, these things have been constructed over the years under numerous administrations. The point is a vehicle can't drive through these fairly short barriers, but wildlife movement is not impeded. And that was by design. And so, we've got very important habitat for the species that you mentioned and numerous others that don't recognize an international border. They just know, that's their habitat. And so these 18-foot bollard walls are just devastating to habitat. So, that's the main issue.
Have there been any studies about how this has impacted wildlife yet?
Yeah, definitely. The interesting thing that I learned, and again, talking about some of the standing declarants that Ollie mentioned, I really got to know people who live along the border, and there's many people, who enjoy that area, but then there's a number of people who study it. Their life work is photographing and trying to help the wildlife and the plants, all the species that are trying to survive. And so there were numerous studies underway before Trump came along. But here's the problem. As soon as they identify a place where they want to do a replacement wall, immediately the bulldozers come in and clear the area. Border Patrol, there's heightened security for Border Patrol, and they pull people over who are just walking and trying to enjoy the land that they've always enjoyed, questioning them, chasing them away. And then they erect these huge lights that are on, all night long, just massive lights, which obviously has an impact on wildlife as well. So even if some of these segments don't ultimately get built, in many cases, a lot of damage has already been done.
I have a question from Paul now. Can you please explain if and how the Sierra Club works with other environmental organizations, such as NRDC, Earth Justice, Union for Concerned Scientists, to accomplish our goals? Ale?
Yes, so we definitely work with our partners all together in this fight, which only makes us stronger. We usually, for these large greenhouse gas litigation matters, we in general work in large coalitions that include all of these groups. Earth Justice sometimes is co-counsel with us in these matters. Some of the large cases have hundreds of different parties, so it's all divide and conquer activity here that takes a lot of planning from the rulemaking that is really geared toward preparing for litigation through the actual litigation. There are lots of different pieces to these cases and a lot of division of labor. In the civil penalty cases that I described earlier, the first time we went to court, the 3 organizations that challenged this delay rule were Sierra Club and RDC and Center for Biological Diversity. And when we had to go back to court the second time around, it was NRDC and us. So we definitely work together with all of these different folks in the clean transportation sphere.
Thank you. Ellie, does the pipeline work also involve coalitions?
Definitely, we're working with partners all the time, sometimes as co-counsel, sometimes the Sierra Club's a client along with other groups. For example, the Southern Environmental Law Center has represented us in a few of these lawsuits, or we've been co-counsel with them. Yeah, I work with NRDC and Earth Justice attorneys all the time, and this week alone, I've been on several conference calls with them involving, well, yesterday it was oil and gas drilling in California's Central Valley, and today it was talking to NRDC about Mountain Valley Pipeline. And we also work with a lot of smaller groups in Appalachia on the pipeline stuff. You know, there's just so many really dedicated small grassroots groups that we work with, and other bigger green groups also work with. And that, I think, makes our work so much more powerful.
Thanks. And Gloria, do you sometimes work with environmental groups and maybe groups that aren't environmental groups?
Yeah, so thanks for that question, because I was remiss by not mentioning the Southern Borders Community Coalition, which they're dedicated to these border communities, and they're a plaintiff in our case, and they have been integral in organizing and helping, you know, tons of communities along the southern border. So it's been an amazing coalition with some of the best lawyers in the country, with ACLU, you know, Sierra Club really addressing a lot of the environmental issues, and then Southern Borders, you know, helping people along the border who are faced with wall building issues. So just in this instance, it's been an incredible coalition. You know, not to mention a number of groups that are helping private landowners who are being faced with takings, where their land is being taken away from them so that a wall can be built. You know, there's libertarian groups that are helping them. Our environmental ally groups have also just been, you know, soldiering through all of these last number of years, given these environmental waivers, trying to think of any innovative way to challenge this construction. So it's, you know, so we've become a very tight-knit group over the last couple of years.
Thank you. Ellie, I have a question for you. Can you talk about the Keystone XL pipeline and how we're fighting that?
Sure. So one of our colleagues has been fighting Keystone XL, I think, for about a decade now. And there are a lot of moving pieces. I'll touch on a huge victory we had earlier this year involving the Army Corps of Engineers Nationwide Permit 12, which they basically used to fast track approval for water crossings for pipelines. And without getting into the weeds too much, the district court judge basically agreed with us that the Army Corps should have initiated what's known as programmatic consultation under the Endangered Species Act when it reissued the Nationwide Permit 12 in 2017 for the entire country. And essentially the Corps had failed to take a look at the nationwide program's impacts on endangered and threatened species and their habitat, and instead used an approach that would allow for piecemeal destruction, kind of pipeline by pipeline. So the district court actually vacated the Nationwide Permit 12 for use by not just Keystone XL, but all oil and gas pipelines nationwide. Unfortunately, ultimately the Supreme Court then limited that, so the vacature right now only applies to Keystone XL, which is still a huge victory for Keystone XL. It would have been nice if it still applied to all pipelines. But so right now, our colleagues are litigating the government's appeal of our victory in the district court in the Ninth Circuit. And I believe I think briefs are due next month. So that's kind of the current status of Keystone, the ongoing saga.
Thanks for the update. I have a question from Linda now. How does the new rule at EPA to streamline the process for approval of big projects impact Sierra Club's legal efforts? Gloria?
I'm actually going to defer the question. It's in my experience in the last nearly 4 years with EPA, it hasn't been any streamlining. They've gone full bore ahead of doing things that they want to do that achieves their goals. And, you know, we've been trying to stop that, which is, my experience giving the pass to coal plants that are emitting, various kinds of pollution. So yeah, my experience has just been a little bit different. So I will defer to my colleagues.
I'll just add that they're trying to weaken the National Environmental Policy Act, which is kind of the Magna Carta of environmental laws, passed in 1969, with these new regulations that are just, trying to make it have less teeth. I haven't litigated using those new regulations yet because they were just finalized and we are challenging them in court. But they're kind of designed to make it harder for the public to participate, make it so fewer projects are get environmental impact statements, making it harder to challenge in court, making it so they don't have to look at the climate impacts. That's a big one. So it is definitely, not great, and hopefully our lawsuit will be successful. It's not just us that has filed. I think a bunch of states have filed lawsuits against the new regulations and many environmental groups. So hopefully those will not be long-lived.
Thank you. I have a question from Jan. How has the addition of the 2 newest conservative justices on the Supreme Court impacted your success in prosecuting environmental lawsuits? And have you changed your approach in trying these cases?
I can start off real quick and then I'll pass it on. It's an interesting question, right? Because justices aren't going to say they're anti-environment. They're not going to say they're anti-civil liberties. But what we do see, and what we're increasingly concerned about, is we challenge rules that the Trump administration has drafted, or before Trump, EPA rules to protect the environment, climate issues, habitats. And so what happens is, the issue is whether or not the Supreme Court is going to defer to the agency's decision. Does Congress have to describe everything that happens under the law, or do agencies have discretion to carry out legislation? And both Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh have taken great interest in administrative law. So it hasn't fully played out yet. We saw a decent decision from Justice Gorsuch in Oklahoma in the Indian law case. So it really has a lot to do with agency deference and administrative law. It's a little wonky, but that's how they achieve their goals, I'd say.
Thanks.
And I'll just add that another issue I think we might be seeing more of that's unrelated to substantive environmental law is things like standing, just, conservative justices making it more difficult for us to bring our cases, get into court in the first place. So that's definitely a concern.
Would you just touch on a second what standing is, Ellie, so that our audience understands that concept?
Sure. So to bring an environmental case, you have to show usually injury, imminent injury, causation, and redressability, which basically means, you are injured and the court can do something about it, and your problem is being caused by the government's breaking the law. So, conservative justices tend to kind of tighten the screws on that a little more and make it more difficult to show those things. So the concern is that it'll be harder for us to stay in court once we file our lawsuits, that we'll get tossed on not showing those elements adequately.
Thanks. I have a question now from Marie. I'd love to hear how Sierra Club vets cases and determines which cases to bring when there is so much out there that we need to fight.
So I can talk about the campaign perspective, how it plays out in campaigns I had the opportunity to work in, Beyond Coal and Clean Transportation for All, which define a strategy usually year by year or in a longer term looking at goals. But basically we have to do planning on how resources are going to get invested to reach a specific targets in terms of how many coal plants we want to see retired, or how essentially looking at a future that is very much dependent on electric vehicles and infrastructure. So we set up legal teams that are based on those goals, and that determines what kind of litigation gets brought as part of the overall campaign planning. So the part of the Clean Transportation for All campaign that I won, which involves like defending the Obama standards, getting more stringent federal fuel economy and greenhouse gas standards in the books, is only one piece of the overall strategy to reach our goals. And then it's a very important piece because greenhouse gases from transportation represent the largest share of climate pollution in the United States. Passenger cars are the largest polluter among the various types of vehicles. So one of the decisions that the campaign has made in the past is that securing very strong standards and then defending them in court is a crucial part of this overall effort.
Thank you.
I just add that you know, our litigation is really part of, and the Sierra Club is kind of unique in this way. We have chapters on the ground, we have organizers, we have campaign staff, we have media staff, we have digital organizers. So we don't want to bring litigation challenging a project if there isn't kind of grassroots activism behind it. You know, the ACP is a great example. I mean, the reason that we challenged that was so many people were on the ground affected and passionately fighting it. If no one on the ground had cared, we probably wouldn't have gotten involved. So that's really, you know, we get to utilize all of those different facets of our organization. And a lot of it is just driven by, you know, what locally is happening and what people care about.
It reminds me of the fact that we are often dubbed lawyer organizers. I have a question from Victoria. Alejandra, you mentioned Toyota and GM as siding with the Trump administration. Was that concerning the emission standards?
So these two companies cited are basically interveners. So are a party that became involved in the first round of litigation that concerns California's authority over greenhouse gas emission standards in the state. So basically, these two companies and others became interveners in support of the Trump administration. So the ask that Sierra Club has been making has been to ask these companies to stop siding with the Trump administration and to actually defend the Obama standards, which are achievable. And there's a lot of record evidence that the Obama EPA put forward all the way through the end of the Obama administration, showing that those standards are basically achievable. So there's no reason not to plan for more progress that is greatly needed for greenhouse gas reductions.
And you think that consumer pressure can help achieve a victory?
Yes, so I will say that, and also once again, thanking many of our members for all the work they do in a specific project that is called the Rev-Up Report. That is one of the key components of the Clean Transportation for All campaign, which involves having, our volunteers have helped us several times already go to dealerships all over the United States to actually understand the inventory of vehicles in the dealerships in their community and get a sense of whether the dealers are well informed about the system of tax credits and rebates to make it possible to make EVs more affordable for everybody. And we've realize that many dealerships either don't have proper inventory or are not well educated on the like on the rebate system, but even just on the more basic question about how zero emission vehicles help decrease in pollution and fight climate change. So many of you, we thank you for helping us figure that out, because that report that has been published a few times has been very critical in increasing awareness that there's a lot of work to be done in the dealerships, whereas the work that folks like I am doing is targeted at manufacturers, basically. So we thank you for that. Obviously, the more education we can help with to increase awareness of the environmental benefits of electric vehicles, the more we build a better record for the agencies to actually put forward more stringent federal rules.
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone for your questions today. And I want to wrap it up with some final thoughts from each of our panelists. Gloria? And you're on mute, so you know.
Yeah, I think it's kind of gone unspoken today that everybody in the environmental law program at Sierra Club is kind of grieving about the loss of the notorious RBG. You know, today was her service at the Supreme Court. And I guess I just want to close to let everybody know that, you know, Sierra Club is going to be very active in doing its level best to make sure that there is no vote taken on a replacement for our beloved RBG before another president is installed, as she said. We're part of a very large progressive coalition that's working very hard on that. Sierra Club will be scouring any nominee's record to see what we can find out about, you know, civil liberties and obviously the environment. In many cases, a lot of these nominees don't even have much of a record, but, you know, we'll do our best. And at this time, we're not really advocating for any structural changes to the court, but we'll also be closely watching that because it's paramount that we do our best to preserve for RBG the integrity of the courts.
Thank you for that. Alejandra?
So I will just say thank you, everybody, for taking the time to listen to us today, and that we're going to continue fighting in the courts. We believe that reducing greenhouse gases from the largest emitting sources, I mentioned two of them, the electric power sector and transportation, which now is the most highly polluting, is a big priority, and we're gonna regardless of the outlook, how things look like in the next few months, we will continue to do our job as best as we can. And the reason why we do it is to try to contribute to create a better future for our members and hopefully the rest of the public.
Thank you. Ellie?
Yeah, I would just, you know, echo what Gloria and Ale said. It's obviously a crazy time in history, but we're just keeping our heads down and continuing to, you know, fight as much of the bad stuff as we can in court, while also working towards, you know, solutions for climate change. And we're going to keep doing that. So thanks for everyone for joining and for your support.
Yeah, I want to thank our panelists and everyone for joining. It was great to have everybody here. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.